Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Stuff Tales from Places, no other than Mr. W.C. Banning. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Banning, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Of course. Thanks for having me. I love your intro music. It is very whimsical. I dig it. So I am W.C. Banning. Some people know me as Cody Banning. This is actually my first professionally published book. I've done some other stuff in some anthologies and so on and so forth, but this is the first one I've had published by a publisher, and that is out on all of the major outlets. I am 41 years old. I am from Fort Smith, Arkansas. Uh, I am active in our local literary society and writers guild, and I'm also a SAG eligible actor. So
Mr. Cody Banning, thank you so much for sharing your book world. And we hope that we are looking forward for more books to come. What
yeah,
is
but
the
my next one should be out next year.
That'd be awesome. So what is the premise of the stuff takes from places?
So it is kind of just a love letter to old pulp novels and short story collections at the same time, and it serves as an introduction to my universe, the Maya Mall universe. There are stories in there for everyone. There's a little bit of sci-fi, fantasy. There's one story that's kind of a horror story, which is the cover piece there, the dog. That story is kind of a horror story, kind of Lovecraftian stuff. There's a little bit in there for everyone. There's also some poems. It's technically a chat book. It's just a little over long, I think, for a chat book. But yeah.
So what is the central character of the book and why drives their journey?
Well, there's a central character to each one of the short stories, but the first story in the book is called A Swift Sword, and the central character to that is a character that will play a future role in future stories, Chow. And what drives him is kind of being the best. He's kind of a jerk sometimes, and that ends up coming back and getting him in the end, especially of this first story here. But the next short story anthology, which will come between the first and second novels, is going to feature him possibly again.
So how did you combine mysteries, romance, and adventures in one storytelling?
What I decided to do with this one was something an old friend of mine had suggested. They said they always liked it when people like Stephen King and Neil Gaiman and other writers like that released their short story collections. And they always said it was kind of their favorite thing. And I was like, well, I've got enough to fill up about 100 pages worth of content. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to stick some poems in there, maybe some Easter eggs so people can later on in a novel go, oh, hey, I remember that. So I just kind of wanted it to be that kind of fun and nostalgic look back on when people used to um, used to do short story collections more often than they do now. So that's how I put it together. I separated each short story with a poem that kind of relates back to the universe as well, and just kind of put it together as a chat book. And one of our local publishers, Red Engine Press, they picked it up, and we did hybrid publishing for various different reasons. It was mainly so we didn't do traditional publishing with them, so I would have more rights to put it on more platforms. Basically, is why we went hybrid.
So how do the settings play a key role in shaping the plot and themes of the story?
So the central setting is called the Maya Mall. It is a mall at the center of the universe. There is a gateway to every possible universe you can imagine. Anything that's ever been written or thought of exists somewhere within the world of the Maya Mall. And all of the different worlds we see in this book, even if they seem a lot like our own, Many of them are not our own and have some fundamental differences that make them a little different. It most of the universes still have their gates inside the Maya Mall open, so they can be visited freely by the people of the mall and of the other universes. But Earth itself has closed theirs off because they have had some bad experiences with magic, and humans tend to be a little they tend to be a little irresponsible with the way they use magic, and so the wider Maya doesn't really want to deal with them anymore. So they closed off the Earth door, and that's why a lot of people on Earth don't really believe in magic anymore. They don't think it exists because they've been closed off from the other worlds of magic. Not all worlds are magical. Some worlds don't have a lot to do with magic, but that's the central premise of the overarching stories that will be in this book and the books to come.
What mysteries unfold throughout the book and how are they resolved?
So there are multiple characters for each one of the stories that will in the future tie into a larger narrative novel that will kind of cap everything off. After the first three books are written, they'll kind of cap everything off. And this book is just about introducing those characters and kind of seeing their first adventures and what they bring to the table and how their characters begin to develop in a short story format. Um, Kind of just leaving most of them on some type of cliffhanger for their future involvement in the larger universe of the Maya.
So, how does the romantic subplot develop alongside the main storyline?
There truly I am one of those folks that's kind of gotten disenfranchised with romance in writing. There is only um one story that by the end of the story end stuff shows you that there is a developing romance. The rest of the stories really either don't get that far or may never get that far. I don't deal with a lot of romantic subplots because I feel like it's kind of been overdone. There will be one in the larger stories in the second novel that I have outlined. There will be a bit of a romantic subplot, but it's more tragic than it is romantic in a lot of ways.
What challenges or obstacles does the protagonist face during their adventures?
So in the first story, in A Swift Sword, Chal is trying to get a hold of a magical hammer to reforge his sword, and it's very tough because the guy that kind of rules over their area of their world, he's a totalitarian. He's a fascist and doesn't want anyone to get his hammer because he can build or destroy anything almost instantly with this hammer. And so that's the challenge he is seeking. In the Dog, which has tended to be everyone's favorite story from this book. It's about two guys working in a gas station in the middle of a small town, and they meet this really creepy, crazy dog that comes out of the woods across the street from their gas station, and they kind of have to deal with some of the horrible situations it puts them in. Um, the Sound of Silence, Serafina she's a mall cop within the Maya Mall. She's a mall security guard, and she has to deal with meeting the big bad of the series. It's the first time he's mentioned in any of my works, and she has to deal with him face to face. And she's young. She's just working this job, trying to figure some things out, and only got the job really because her dad was a mall cop before her, and so she meets him face to face, and it becomes a very big challenge for her.
Big challenge. So, how did you balance elements of suspense, emotion, and action?
I I tend to kind of rush through fight scenes. I've been told that a number of times. I rush through fight scenes. So I have tried in these to kind of drag them out and make a couple of chase scenes. There are a couple of the stories that don't really have any big fight scenes, like the Dancers in the Desert. really the big fight scene for that becomes not a fight scene at all. And I feel like that's kind of a balance in and of itself, because they're dealing with these enormous ancient statues that you don't have to fight, as long as you show respect to the desert that these colossi are in. There's no need to fight them. They let you pass on your way through this very dangerous desert. And so the main characters in that, the commandant and Tuskrat, they learn that as they go through. And so I'd like to think that the stories are pretty balanced, and anyone can find a story that they're going to enjoy. It's not just straight up high fantasy action or sci-fi, or even just straight horror in this. It's I feel like there's a each one of the stories kind of offers while it offers a little piece of the Maya and how it may exist. There's not a lot of that stuff. There is one called The Way of the World, that is about two factions that exist inside the Maya that are fighting each other in a continuous loop. Their battle loops, and there is a romance between those. There is a romance between the two leaders of those groups that does last, but they all exist in this frozen loop of fighting. And that replays over and over again. It's just kind of a cycle. And the story there, the short story, is just one of those cycles.
So, what role do secondary characters play in adding depth to the narrative?
Um, there are a number of secondary characters, especially in A Swift Sword, at the beginning of the book, that will play a larger role later on. And it seems like they're just supporting characters at the moment. But I I have this I have this belief, and I've always had this belief because I grew up with, what folks call the Scooby Doo formula, where the supporting characters are just as important as the main characters. And so some of the characters in these stories that kind of seem like supporting characters probably will be more major characters later on. So it's kind of important that they be more fleshed out than just two-dimensional supporting characters. There are some shorter stories about some of the smaller universes that you don't really even get into that. It's just one or two characters. No Such Things is just about kind of the existence of certain magical beings still on Earth, and still behind the Earth Gate, and how they survive and how they're terrified of humans, because in my universe the humans kind of ended up being the bad guys. And so it's pretty funny there, and there's kind of a dichotomy there with those characters. And we don't get to see a ton of character development in that story. It's mainly just going through the emotions of two groups that are afraid of each other. But I think secondary characters are very important, and there will be secondary characters throughout the series of the novels to come that will become more of a main character as it goes along.
So, Mr. Cuddy, Stuffed Tales from Places is an anthology.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So, how does the protagonist's personality evolve as they navigate direct locations?
Differently. Uh if that makes sense.
Yes.
With Chow and A Swift Sword, he has a tendency to rush in headlong. He's very impatient. He doesn't want to wait. And so a lot of the tension there is resting with him or behind him. He kind of creates a lot of his own tension. As opposed to Serafina in The Sound of Silence, she's more reactionary. She is one who would rather have a conversation and solve things without any kind of violence. And so as she moves through her narrative, it's more subdued until the very end, until she's absolutely forced to do things, absolutely forced into that prolonged fight scene. Um, there in one of many, the main character is actually a nickel. And it's funny because it kind of explores the secret life of things that we could attribute human personalities to that don't have them, and to see him grow over the years that are discussed in that short story is very interesting. To me, it was very interesting to me. Once again, that's I guess that's my own opinion and the opinion of some of my readers I've spoken to, but it's very interesting humanizing that non-person character and having them go through their story and the changes and journey that they have and the tension that they build, being just like any other story with any other person protagonist. So you'll find that a lot in the book. I know there's stories I'm missing that I'm not talking about because there's quite a few in there, but these are the main ones that I've talked with my readers about.
Very well said, Mr. Cuddy. Very well said. So, how does the book create a sense of intrigue and keep readers engaged in its stories?
That is one of my favorite things to do in my writing. Each one of these stories, most of them don't have a resolution. The story of the nickel, one of many that I was talking about, comes to a supposed resolution, but and of course, the way of the world has a continuing, revolving uh, resolution that just happens over and over again. But both of those situations, if you think about them as you're reading them, the reader is probably going to be left with an idea that it's not quite the end. In other stories, it's more blatant. With how a swift sword ends and how Sound of Silence end, they seem kind of final, but there's a very implied to be continued at the end of those. Um, Never wrote actually to be continued at the end of the story, but it's very implied that there's got to be more to this with those. So I kind of try to create the tension, especially in this, since the book's purpose was to introduce the universe. My purpose and the tension I was trying to build and the intrigue I was trying to build was, hey, there's going to be more. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned, people. So, what would be your advice for those aspiring writers out there want to write anthology?
Do it. Don't wait. If you've already written short stories, polish them up, slap them in a book, and put it out there. Nowadays, in the world we live in, you don't have to wait for a publisher. You don't have to get lucky like I did and know a publisher that is ready to take your book before it's even completely finished. You can have this chance to to do things on your own, and I know it's said over and over again to the point that it's almost cliche these days, but just do what you want to do. And you may not become the next Stephen King that way, but you could. I have a close internet friend. We became good friends. His name is J.R. Matthews. He wrote the Jake's Magical Market series and the Portal to Nova Roma series. It was lit RPG, uh, was the genre, and he happened to write that right around the time lit RPG was just starting to blow up and become a big thing. And he used to be a very successful lawyer, and now, as far as I know, he writes full time because his books have just exploded, and he's completely self-published.
Yes.
Completely self-published, and for the first number of years, he didn't even have hard copies of his book. They were just distributed through Kindle Unlimited and other ebook services. And he started to get hard copies now, but because he's become so popular, but he started just by putting his, and I say this, and it's going to sound like I'm saying just by doing this easy thing to put your book up on Amazon yourself. It is not easy. It is a lot of work, but he did all that work himself and without a publisher, put it there and became good Lord. I think he's been number one a few times in his genre on Amazon. So
Yes, people, and stop procrastinating. If you have the
just do it.
passion to write, write, show to the world, and let's read it. So, what is your short term and long term goals in writing?
Short term is finish this book that I'm currently writing. Short term is I'm at about 65,000 words now. I need to be about I need to be about 85 to 90,000 before I hit the big editing process. So get that finished in the next couple of months and get it edited and get my querying process done with the publishers I'm talking to. And long-term goal is finish the first series, and I won't say much more because I've probably given away by saying that the fact that there will be a second series from one of the other universes of the Maya after the first series is done. So might as well just throw that out there to the public. There it is. Everyone knows now. But my long-term goal is finish all of the books I have outlined. I have a number outlined, and I was stuck in that thing of not doing it, of procrastinating, not writing my books, and just outlining book after book. And I have now these usable outlines. That was the one good thing about procrastination. I have all of these usable outlines so that I just have to flesh them out and turn them into books.
Yes, yes, yes. Good luck to your goals, Mr. Cuddy and Mr. Cuddy Bannon. Thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you so much, Daniel.
anthology to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is available just by searching Stuffed Tales from Places. It's available on any of the major outlets. You can find me on Blue Sky Social, Kodafet. That's KODAFETT.bluesky.social. And you can also find me on Instagram as Kodafet.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Cody Banning because if you support him, more anthology to come. So, Mr. Banning or Mr. Cody, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
More to come, people. See you soon. You are most welcome to come back. Mr. Cody, if you have your second